So thank you everyone for joining us today. Good morning and welcome. My name is Corey Riley. And I would also like to introduce Karen DeCool. We're both with 511 Contra Costa. 511 Contra Costa is a countywide program that strives to reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality by providing the public with information and resources and tools that help promote mobility options beyond just driving in cars alone. So thank you for joining us today for 511cc's first bicycle education webinar. It is entitled Bike Community Basics and Street Riding Safety. Before we hear from our presenter, though, I wanted to quickly just take care of a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute for this webinar. If you have a question or a problem hearing us or anything like that, you can please type it in the chat box that's located at the bottom of the toolbar on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as the webinar gets going. We will be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box as we go. That's also located at the bottom of the toolbar at the screen. So type those as we go, and we will get those at the end at the Q&A session. At the end of the webinar, one lucky participant will be randomly selected to receive a $20 Amazon gift card. So make sure you stick around until the end. And then we'll be messaging one of you the winner for an email address that we can send that prize to. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have the recording up on the 511 Contra Costa website within 24 hours or so after this presentation ends. So after all of that housekeeping, I would now like to pass things over to our presenter this morning, John Ciccarelli. He is the owner and head coach from Bicycle Solutions. They're a San Francisco Bay Area coaching service specializing in training new and returning riders of all abilities and ages. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Clark. And thank you for 511 Contra Costa for inviting me to be the presenter for this series. We've got a lot of information to cover in an hour. This is just a survey course to introduce you to resources and ways of thinking about getting around on a bike if you're transitioning from purely recreational riding to more utility trips. And so I've got a lot of information to go by pretty quickly, but the presentation will hook you up with resources of all types and show you what's possible, hopefully. I wanted to reiterate that 511 Contra Costa covers all modes. This is about choices. Becoming more comfortable on a bike to get around town is adding a choice to your transportation possibilities. And there are many other choices, and the agency that's presenting this can help you with all of them. I do a variety of things, including the coaching service. I do transportation planning for bicycling and walking. I do some bicycle infrastructure, parking design, and I'm active in the Bay Area and throughout California as one of UC Berkeley's evaluators for helping cities with complete streets issues such as crosswalks, bikeways, you name it. Today, I want to cover a framework that'll help you understand what to focus on to get yourself more comfortable on the street. We'll start with some basics, including the types of bicycles, some basic skills that I think are fundamental and fortunately can be learned off the street, either practiced by yourself or with a friend, so that you're much more confident when you do take the bike on the street. A brief framework on bicycle driving, basically operating the bicycle as if you were a driver, which you are under the law. The types of bikeways that you'll see out there on streets, how to think about using streets that don't have bike lanes. There's a pretty simple framework for thinking about how to operate between intersections and how to approach intersections. A few things about choosing routes, especially in this age of apps, and securing your bike. Brief tour of bikes on transit with pictures, and then a little bit about how to establish the habit, resources to look at educating yourself further, either in person or on the web. Places to ride. Some of you have no doubt, if our poll last Wednesday is any indication, have already enjoyed a lot of these places in Contra Costa County. And then a wrap up with Q&A and the drawing. Let's get started with some benefits. Lots of benefits to bicycling. It's economical. It actually is very environmentally beneficial. Of all the choices, including like recycling, some are frankly more powerful than others in reducing your environmental impact, and bicycling is one of those. It really can, by substituting car trips as you feel comfortable doing so, decrease your carbon footprint. Carbon footprint, I've been reading up on this, is kind of like an invention of the oil industry, believe it or not, to put all the onus on the individual when corporate responsibility has a big part to play in whether we can dig ourselves out of this climate mess. But as far as what an individual can do, bicycling and substituting bike trips as possible is really powerful. Biking is much less carbon intensive than driving solo or even as public transit, and it combines well with public transit. It also, unique among other alternative travel modes to driving, integrates fitness. So your activity, your body, we evolved as human beings. The divergence in the genealogy many millions of years ago made us suited to be active, and yet we're not very active in the first world here. So getting that activity built into your life is one thing that bike trips can do. I'm curious to know from you what you would like to do more with your bike, why you're here to attend the class. And so I'm going to have Cora do the first poll. What would you like to use your bike for? Whenever all our responses were rolled in, we'll present the results. Great, so a good mix of things, including shopping and running errands. That's kind of what we were hoping for. Commuting to work and school, and doing more recreation, being comfortable, getting out there with partners, friends, and family. Good. Thank you. Back to continuing on. Basic bike vocabulary. If you're just getting back into biking, you want to know what to tell the bike shop that you want. Most people get around on what we call a hybrid or city bike. It's a fairly upright seating position. Basic wheels and tires built for mostly riding on pavement and paved trails and packed unpaved trails. Some people call any bike with a flat bar, a flat handlebar, a mountain bike, but mountain bikes are actually specific to off-road riding. They tend to be equipped with a really good suspension, and the riding position may be a little bit more leaned forward for control on trails. If you really want to go fast, you want to get your body even more leaned over into an aerodynamic position, and you probably would choose something called a road bike, which has curved drop handlebars. So on the bottom of the figure here are some terms that the industry uses to describe how you want your bike to support you. It may be upright or lean forward a little bit, sporty, putting more weight on your arms, but a little bit more aerodynamic. Aggressive is not all about anger management. It's about being lean forward further for higher performance, less wind drag. And finally, to maximize your speed, you want to get as much of your body out of the way as possible, and that would be an aerodynamic posture. So other bike types, especially for utility riding, the family bike or cargo bike setup with a longer frame and a cargo space in back or a big cargo space in front are become very popular, and combined with electric assist, this is quite a SUV on the road. It's the bicycle SUV. Recumbents are feet forward bikes. On parts of Contra Costa County, it's flat, and a recumbent can perform very well and very comfortably. We want to talk about e-bikes as well. That happens to be my red bike. For getting around San Francisco, I just jump on in street clothes and I can be anywhere in the city in about half an hour. E-bikes come in 3 flavors. Okay, the first 2, class 1 and 2, the helper motor detects when you're pedaling and will help you up to 20 miles an hour. Above 20, you can go faster, but you're on your own. Class 3 bike, which my bike is, will help up to 28 miles an hour. And then class 2 differs from the other classes in that, in addition to helping while you're pedaling, you can just push a throttle lever and have the bike power itself. An e-bike typically has a control panel, a fancy dashboard on the handlebar with a button for more or less assistance. Mine has 4 steps of assistance, and frankly, it has changed the game for me in San Francisco and for my wife. We live in a very hilly part of San Francisco, and we really want to climb that hill back up to home only about once a day. With the e-bike, no problem at all. Another type of bike that's really useful depending on your living and working situation is a folding bike. These come in various shapes and sizes. This happens to be a British-made bike called a Brompton. It solves all sorts of problems, gets you on transit when transit is full, lets you take the bike in a car and pop out and do the rest of the trip on your folding bike, secure it at work without worrying about theft. So I'm guessing that many of you already have folding bikes, so let's ask, who's riding what? If you have a bike, what type is your main bike? And the results are? Great. So many of you are riding upright bikes, few mountain, few road, good. And electric bike is fairly well represented. That's good. Very practical vehicle. It's mature technology. You can get it from just about any bike shop. And there are also specialty shops that specialize in electric assist bikes. Good. Okay, let's switch gears sort of to skills. In my coaching service, which I share with some other instructors that I've handpicked around the greater Bay Area, we've noticed that people that are seeking more comfort on the street, some of them are in need of refreshing some of the basic skills. So when we work with absolutely new riders of all ages, we start with the very basics. How do you get the kickstand up and down? How do you elegantly mount and dismount the bike? What's a good power pedal start? So let's talk really briefly through these, and then we'll take a poll to see what you're comfortable with. When I get ready to get going, I want to get the kickstand up. I'll stand on the left side of the bike where the kickstand is. I'll grasp the seat in my right hand and grasp the left handlebar in my left hand. And I do something that really helps a lot. I squeeze the brake so the bike can't roll while I do the rest of it. To get the kickstand up, I'll lean the bike away from me, sort of towards the right, if you will. Get the kickstand up, lean the bike back to the left towards me to make it easier to get my leg over. I'll swing my leg over. To dismount, I also make sure to use those brakes. I'll squeeze and hold those brakes. To start more powerfully and more confidently, you want to develop the habit of sitting on the bike with one foot on the ground, flat-footed, the bike leaned towards that foot, with that leg firm and straight, and the other foot lift the pedal into your starting position so that you are ready to push and you don't have to delay scooting along the ground while you get the bike moving. What does steady leg coasting mean? It turns out that, well, coasting is rolling without pedaling, and you'll do that a lot when you're going up down a hill, for example. To stabilize the bike while you're coasting, it really helps to make that one leg firm and put that pedal in the bottom position and rest some weight on it. So that's that steady leg posture. That's also helpful in making a really confident stop. I teach what I call the 3-step stop. The first thing I do is I stop pedaling, the bike's rolling, and I steady that leg. And then I firm up my arms. Now I have sort of a tripod posture with 2 firm arms and on 1 firm leg. The bike is super stable, ready to stop in a straight line, and I can stop it confidently. To turn, you lean with the bike, no more and no less. And when you're turning without having to pedal, it helps to use that steady leg as well. Steady the leg on the outside of the turn. So if I'm turning left, I'm going to straighten my right leg, put weight on the right-hand pedal, and use that to stabilize the bike in the turn. We don't have enough time to really go into shifting gears, but I want to tell you what they're all about if you're not familiar with gears. Most of the bikes that you ride will have 2 shifters, one for the right hand one for the left hand. The shifter may be a twist knob, or it may be a pair of levers. And the purpose of the levers or the knob is to increase or decrease the pedal resistance, depending on your conditions. So you shift for comfort to keep the pedaling not too hard, not too easy. The right-hand shifter on the bike shifts within a range. Most of your cycling will be done in a single range when the road is flat or a little bit up or a little bit down. But on your left hand, you have typically two additional ranges. One for going slow and climbing a really steep hill, one for going fast and keeping up with that fast bike. So 3 ranges on the left-hand shifter and shifting within a range on the right-hand shifter. So that's the basics. On the right side column, what I call pre-driving skills, these are things that build on the basics and get you comfortable, ready to ride on the street, but you can practice them off the street. You know how to stop, that three-step stop will stop you confidently. Now, practice stopping at a particular location, because when you roll up the stop sign, you want to stop way before the stop sign, and you don't want to roll into the intersection. Holding a nice straight line, and then shifting that line several feet to the left or several feet to the right without overshooting. Riding a straight line and checking over your shoulder, what we call scanning. If you are uncomfortable scanning because your bike tends to swerve when you scan, here's how to cure it. Firm up the arm that you're about to look over. So if I'm going to scan over my left shoulder, just before I turn my neck, I will firm up the left arm, and that really takes care of it. The bike continues to go straight. Practice looking further and further to the side until you can scan behind you for about 2 seconds. Hand signals. The hand signals on the bike, which I don't have a figure for, are right arm straight out for right turn, left arm straight out for left turn. Alternate right turn signal is to hold your left arm straight out and then raise your forearm to a vertical position, forming like a letter L. That's the signal that a motorist would use if he or she had no working turn signals. And then finally, putting scanning and signaling and shifting your line together, you have a merge, the merge sequence. So when I'm in a car and I want to change lanes to my left, I put my blinkers on, I check my mirrors, I check over my shoulder, and I look to see if that driver behind me is cooperating by making a space to let me in. On a bike, the sequence is similar. First, I'll scan, I'll look at them. I might scan again so they really know that I'm interested in moving in front of them. And then I'll point not to the left, but down into their line of travel. I say effectively, hey, I'd like to move in front of you if you'll let me. And if it looks like they cooperate by holding space for me to move into, I'll typically repeat that hand signal. I say, okay, I'm really going this time. And then I'll move my line of travel and single up with them. As we'll see on the street slides, there are times when you need to move from sharing a street side by side and allowing passing to lining up with traffic to go through a narrow space. So these are all things you can practice and get working on your own on a parking lot or schoolyard. So tell us which ones you're more comfortable with.
This is a long poll, so don't forget to scroll down.
Right. And while the poll is going on, I'm going to respond to one of the chat questions. The L-shaped arm signal is a right turn signal, but it's done with the left arm. So the left arm is raised into a letter L shape, indicating that you want to turn right. A little less understood by motorists compared to the right arm signal, and they're both legal in California. Someone else is saying, I don't see any slides. I'm hoping everybody's seeing the slides. Great. Do we have results? Good. Good level of comfort on the first part of the skills and pretty good comfort on the others. Go forward and practice. The more you get these working solidly off the street, the more you'll be comfortable on the street. So let's move on. I agree, a hand signal slide would be good. Let's talk a little bit about how to operate on the street, starting with the types of bikeways that you'll see, and then how to ride on shared streets. So we're going to cover very quickly the types of bikeways and then some things that you'll see at intersections. This is a complicated figure. It has an upper half and a lower half. So starting from the left, the simplest type of bicycle markings that are on some streets just basically is a chevron shape with a bicycle icon. On the pavement, it says, motorists expect bicyclists. Bicyclists, think about riding at least this far from the curb to keep yourself safe from the gutter and from the opening car doors. Some streets have a stripe on the edge, but it's really not a bike lane. It's just an edge line. Some space to the right of the edge line may be rideable. Some space may be not quite so wide. If it's wideable and rideable, safely rideable space, and it has a bicycle icon, it's a bike lane. When you add a slashed area next to the bike lane, it becomes what's called a buffered bike lane. Continuing, lately there are even more separated types of bike lanes. So take a buffered bike lane and put floating parking next to it. You have what's called a parking separated bike lane or a cycle track, a one-way cycle track. Some cycle tracks are slightly raised relative to the pavement, that's the middle figure, and some have some sort of a barrier, maybe a flexible post or a series of bumps between you and traffic. So here's some examples. These are, the left-hand images are in Golden Gate Park. What they did was they moved the parking away from the pavement edge, added a striped area where the door can open so you can offload cargo to enjoy the park. And there's plenty of room left for two cyclists to ride side by side. The right-hand image is another short cycle track. This one's a two-way cycle track, and it's in Albany, between a couple intersections near a new development to hook a trail along the street to a cross street that continues the bikeway. That particular cycle track has a bicycle signal. It's like a traffic signal, but it has bicycle-shaped indications. Speaking of intersection stuff, here are several things you'll see at intersections. The left-hand figure is called a bike box. It basically continues the bike lane, which may or may not be green, up to the intersection and provides an advanced waiting area for bicyclists to congregate and lead into the intersection, make it less likely that a right turner will cut them off. The middle one is called a turn box. So if I'm approaching on the street at the top of the figure toward the camera, and I want to turn left, I don't have to move over into the left turn lane, which might be tricky on a lot of streets. Instead, I can continue forward, stop at the corner, rotate my bike, and get ready to wait for green in the cross direction. The upright figure is from Walnut Creek. This is California. And this is an approach bike lane, here also colored green, not required. And through the intersection, we see what are called extension markings. So it makes it very clear to everybody where the bikes are going to be. Lower left is what's called a mixing zone. This is that same one-way cycle track in Golden Gate Park. Next to it is the end of a blue handicap parking space. It's not currently occupied. So moving traffic is to the left of that handicap space, but it might want to turn right at this intersection that the cyclist is approaching. So there's an area that lets the two parties, the cyclist and the right turning car driver, notice each other and position each other safely to go through the intersection. Between intersections, it helps to know how to think about how to operate. It's very simple. When you're going down a street that has no bike lane, the first thing you want to do is identify what part of the street is rideable and safe. So along car doors, you don't want to ride where the door can open. So I totally subtract or disregard that width. What's left is my safe rideable width. Then I ask myself, in that width, say between the center of the street and the door zone where I don't want to ride, is it wide enough for someone to pass me in a car? If it is comfortably wide enough, then I expect that to happen. And I do what I call sharing the space. So I just don't worry about people passing me. But maybe up ahead, there's a double parked Amazon truck where the road gets narrow. In that case, it's not safe for me to allow people to pass me in that narrow space. So I want to look over my shoulder, maybe signal, and I want to move in line with traffic when it's safe to do so. And that's what we call controlling the space. So on a street without bike lanes, you're always thinking about what the next thing you're going to do. Am I going to share the space or control the space? We already talked about how to move between sharing and control. It's that merge sequence: scan, signal, confirm, move. So getting that sequence working off street is so helpful in making you comfortable on what we call shared streets. There's a couple examples of lanes that may or may not be shareable. The upper left image, I look at that and I say, yeah, that's just barely shareable. I could probably do it. So I'm going to ride not too close to the curb and expect cars to pass me. Lower left image, not shareable at all. Unsafe to try and share it because I might be forced into the bushes. So on that street, I either want to control the lane if it's comfortable for me to do so, or if it's uncomfortable, I'm going to have to find another route. State law addresses sidewalk cycling in every state, but it's addressed differently. In California, the state law has two parts with regard to sidewalk cycling. The first part says we don't really prohibit it at the state level, but we allow local agencies, cities, counties, to regulate sidewalk cycling. So it really depends on what your city that you're traveling through has done. For example, in Walnut Creek, sidewalk cycling is legal under age 16, except in certain business areas. That's pretty typical for the suburbs. What's the big deal about sidewalk cycling? Why isn't it safer to ride on the sidewalk? Well, the upper right figure really tells the tale. At driveways, fast traffic on the sidewalk may not be seen by traffic entering and exiting the driveway. Driveway sidewalk intersections are kind of made for pedestrian speed decision making. Okay, the other thing that happens on sidewalks that gets people into trouble is entering intersections. The upper left cyclist is preparing to enter an intersection, but they're going to enter the intersection toward the crosswalk, which is right in line with right turning traffic alongside them. So typically a sidewalk cyclist that's unaware of this conflict is at risk of getting what we call right hooked. The cyclist in the lower left picture is riding down a business sidewalk and may surprise the pedestrian in front of them and may be very surprised if someone jumps out of a business door. Brief word about intersections. I think about intersections in two ways. Does it have multiple lanes and a lot of complexity, or is it a simple intersection? Okay. At a big intersection, I want to know where to approach the intersection, which lane to choose, and I want to make sure that I don't let down my guard through the intersection on the far corner. Okay. Going through the intersection, depending on the way the signal works, there may be oncoming left turn traffic if I'm making a left turn. So here's a couple of examples: a simple intersection and a more complicated intersection, both in Walnut Creek. The key here is to choose your approach space before you get to the intersection. In the lower image, that's clear. There's a bike lane that's clearly indicated for going through. I would use the bike lane to go through, but I wouldn't use it to turn right. I'd be in the right turn lane. If I wanted to turn left, I could move over into the left turn lanes for the cars, but as we'll see on the next slide, there are a couple other ways to avoid having to do that. On the simpler intersection at the top, I have drawn 3 orange lines indicating that I want to be in position before I reach the intersection. So 2 slides ago, I was talking about sharing or controlling between intersection, but as I come up to an intersection, whether it's small or big, I switch my thinking to intersection thinking. And intersection thinking is all about, where am I going to be turning? Will I be turning right? Will I be going through? Will I be turning left? I want to then maybe look over my shoulder and move into position before I get to the intersection. I don't want to wait to the last minute, so I'm kind of stuck on the right side if I'm turning left. So the curvy lines in the upper figure are indicating that I've already started thinking like intersection. I'm already moved into my position by the time I reach the stop line. Here's a couple other ways to turn left. So path number 1 is like you turn left in a car. Path number 2 is a 2-step way of turning. You move into the intersection as if you're going through, find a place out of traffic to stop and turn your bike while you still have enough time before the red light comes, and then turn and wait for the green light in the cross direction. And a lot of us, when we were kids and first starting to bike for transportation, we were told to walk the bike through the crosswalks and then get back on at the other side. That's still available to you anytime as an adult cyclist. The lower right figure shows the use of that turn box that I displayed earlier. In this case, there's a bike lane on the approach. The cyclist uses the bike lane while the traffic light in their direction is still green, looks into the turn box, parks the bike in the turn box, lifts it up and turns it, and gets ready to proceed on green. A couple other things to be concerned about in intersection: trucks and buses. They're long, and especially a trailer truck needs to pull way into the intersection before it can start to make the turn. This may mislead you into thinking that the truck is going through. Do not approach on the right side of the truck. Either wait behind it for it to make its move, or if it's already at the curb and you can see a way to pass it on the left, then that's, of course, an available way to do that. The trailer will describe a smaller path that brings it close to the corner. That's called off tracking, and it can trap you as the trailer starts to swing. If you ever make the mistake and the trailer starts to swing towards you and there's not enough time, drop the bike and run. Get off the bike, sacrifice the bike, and get to safety. But much better to realize what this hazard's all about and never put yourself in jeopardy. Okay, enough of the bicycle driving. How do we get there? Many cities, including Walnut Creek, have bicycle user maps. This one with color and style shows you some options. Now notice though, that there's a whole bunch of streets that are just colored in white. Those are your residential streets, your simple streets that are also part of your options on a bike. So your path across the city will be a combination of what might be called bikeway streets and ordinary residential streets. How do I plan a route? I start by identifying the barriers I'm going to cross. On a bike, a freeway is a barrier. I have to find a way over it or under it. A waterway is a barrier, a railway is a barrier. So I identify the barriers, where am I going to cross the barriers, and use that to stitch together my route. Google helps a lot. Google's bike layer, which is the green lines that appear when you turn on the bicycling layer, but especially the bicycle directions are very helpful. This happens to be a Google Maps bike direction from my home in Bernal Heights, San Francisco, to the closest BART station, Glen Park. So Google's shown me three different routes, 9, 10, and 11 minutes. And it even showed me at the lower left what my elevation gain and elevation drop is going to be. So no big deal on my e-bike. And if I were to tell it to show me the opposite direction, it might show me a different route based on how much climbing I have to do. Once you get to your destination, how do you keep your bike from being stolen? The biggest piece of advice is to lock the frame of the bike. The frame is the tubes, not just the wheel, but the tubes of the bike. And use a serious lock. A serious lock is like a U-shaped lock, also known as a D-lock, or a hardened segmented lock that can't be cut, like the one in the lower left picture. Okay, so you've locked the frame of the bicycle to an immovable object. How do you keep your wheels from being stolen? You could run a cable from your main lock to the wheel and back, as is shown in the upper right figure, but a better way to do it is to buy for about $50 to $65 what's called a locking skewer kit. The picture is the little picture to the left there. This replaces your axle skewers and optionally your seat post skewers, and on some kits, your stem skewer if you have a special type of stem that connects your handlebars to your fork. And that key, that black thing at the lower part of the figure, that's a special dome-shaped key for this particular type of skewer kit that lets you carry that with you and unlock your wheels should you ever need to remove your wheels to, say, change a flat. The cool thing about a skewer kit is now you don't have to worry about locking your wheels. You just lock the frame and boom, you're done, you're off to your meeting and there's no delay. So invest in a good quality, say, U-lock. I actually use two U-locks in San Francisco, both at least $50 worth. And I have a skewer kit, which cost me about $65, and I don't have to worry about theft. So how do you currently lock your bike? Here's a poll. Bottom line here is even if you have a relatively inexpensive bike, budget for some serious locking hardware. Okay, let's see the results. Good. Okay, so those of you using just cable locks and chains and hardware store padlocks, think about what your option might be. I see some people have experience with the sophisticated hardened locks or the big super duper chains like the New York chain or the Forget About It chain, both kryptonite brand. Moving on, closing the discussion of bicycle driving, your helmet, it's just like a seatbelt, just wear one. And I see a lot of teenagers riding around with the helmet on, but the chin strap loose. I guess that's a sort of a nod towards the adult requirement for a helmet, but it does no good when you go down because the helmet's going to fly off your head. So clip that helmet on your head. To get it to fit, most helmets these days have a tightener in the back, like a construction worker's helmet. It's either a knob or a pair of sliders. So get that helmet as tight on your head as you want without making your eyes bug out. Then make sure it's level, tilt it down in front so you can see it above your eyes. Okay, the side strap should come up under your ears. Some helmets made by Specialized don't require a side adjustment. They have a spreader just under the ear. Others have a slider that goes up. Make it like a letter Y. And finally, leave a little bit of talking room under your chin, but not too much slack. You want that helmet to stay in place if your forehead strikes and protect your forehead. Every ride, even short rides, don't think, oh, I'm not going on a long ride. I'm not going to use my helmet. Helmets are also a great place to mount a mirror. On a car, you have a mirror in the middle of the front seat, and you have mirrors on the left side, and hopefully on the right side. On a bicycle, you can also put mirrors on your handlebars, but I find a more effective place to put the mirror is on your head. I wear eyeglasses all the time, so I choose the middle option, and the best by far eyeglass mounted mirror I found is called a Take a Look. It's about $20 and folds flat when it's off of your eyeglasses. In the upper picture is a couple of options. If you don't have eyeglasses, you can mount the mirror to your helmet. And then there's a couple of mirrors at the lower end. The upper mirrors, the head mounted mirrors, tend to be planar, which means they don't distort. They're not going to show you something that is closer than it appears. All you need to do is look at your left eye real quick. It's nice to have a mirror on your head because you can turn your head just a little and scan all the lanes behind you. It's very convenient. You also don't have to look down. In a car driving mirror, you don't have to look down because the mirror is alongside your head. But on a bike mirror, you have to look down towards the handlebars. If you feel more comfortable, put a helmet mirror, head-mounted mirror on your head, and also a bike mirror. Night riding, just like in a car, you're required to have a white front light and a red thing in the rear. The bike requirement doesn't actually require a light in the rear, but it's an old law, so it's much better to actually have a light in the back. Quick tour of bikes in transit. The good news is that almost every single transit vehicle on the road and on the water and on the rails in the Bay Area is bike friendly. That card in the center is something that you probably, maybe you already have. It's called the Clipper card. It stores value in your account and it can be used to get you on any sort of transit system. So before we go into what those look like, I'm curious who has ridden these various transit systems and brought a bike on board the transit vehicle. Someone asked whether transit systems support longer cargo bikes. Each system has its own bike space size, so it really varies. There are length limitations on Caltrain, for example, and I would imagine also on BART, a very long cargo bike may not fit. And I think tandems and trailers are also prohibited. So a lot of you, about a quarter of you have taken the bike on BART. BART's nice because once you've got the bike up to the platform level, you just roll right on horizontally without having to lift the bike. It's like about 1/6 of you have actually put the bike on a bus rack. That's great. The ferry in Contra Costa County, it's Richmond Ferry Terminal. Capital Corridor is a train, as we'll see, that goes up to Sacramento and beyond and down to San Jose. The ACE train really isn't a Contra Costa thing. It's goes through Livermore, Pleasanton, Fremont, and down to San Jose. So all of the major systems have a bicycle page that you can learn what's possible in the transit system. Here's some pictures from BART. Upper left, the BART system has wide fare gates, one in every station, and you walk your bike through the wide fare gate. I find that it's useful to stand next to the detector in the fare gate so the doors of the fare gate don't close on my bicycle. I push the bicycle forward ahead of me, and then I follow with my body. On board BART, you'll see a bar and straps. So you lean the bike against the bar, or if someone's already leaned their bike against the bar, you lean it against their bike. You pull the long strap out, and the strap has a clip, so you can clip and cinch your bike into place so it doesn't flop around. Now, don't walk away from it, get distant from it, because thieves do ride the trains, and you want to make sure that you are within view of your bike, okay, even if you're standing. In the lower left picture are some newfangled bike racks that let people lock in the outside area of a BART station, and especially people that don't come with a sophisticated lock. So something new. Capital Corridor, we mentioned this train. There's the map at the upper right. Great bike space on board. This is vertical bike space. So the model in the lower left has somehow got her bike up onto the rear wheel. How do you do that? You can practice this just out on the sidewalk. Stand next to your bike on the left side. Extend your arms forward. Squeeze the right brake as your arm is extended. Don't try and deadlift the bike. Simply keep your arms straight as if they are cables and walk backwards. Because you've squeezed the right brake, the rear wheel is going to pivot. So the bike's front wheel rises up off the ground, and pretty soon you find yourself at the balance point. Now you can look like a bike mechanic. You can walk your bike vertically down the sidewalk. You can turn it. You can position it next to the rack on board the train, and then using your knee under the seat, you just pop it up gently onto the support. Some of the supports on the Capital train are vertical. Some of the supports require a little bit of rotation of the front wheel. Once the bike is in place and you've extended the locking arm, you use your main lock to lock the bike to the support. Capital Corridor, like BART, has electronic lockers called e-lockers. They were invented in Emeryville, actually, by E-Locker Corporation, and there's a corresponding card called a bike link card. So 511 Contra Costa has a program called Secure Your Bicycle, which gets you a free bike link card. And there are videos on Bike Link's site that show you how to use it. It's pretty easy. Lately, Bike Link has enhanced their system so the Clipper card, if it's been paired or signed into your Bike Link account, can be used to activate the locker. The lockers charge a few pennies per hour, so that's how they recoup their costs over a long period of time. And they are not reserved for months at a time. It's roll up and use it. Some of the lockers at these stations, you can actually determine whether the locker is available before you leave home. And I think you can remotely reserve them. So again, that program from 511 Contra Costa is called Secure Your Cycle. Bus racks have 2 or 3 cradles. There's a direction to them. The end of the cradle that has the hook arm is for your front wheel. And the cradles are alternated so that it lets more bikes be stored in a dense space without the handlebars tangling. So what you do is you get your bike up into the cradle and you extend the hook arm and it pulls out, comes up, and secures your front wheel. Here's a diagram at the top from AC Transit showing a 2-bike rack. The lower left is actually Steve Berthold. He's BART's bicycle coordinator, but he's demonstrating an AC Transit 2-bike rack. The lower right image is a 3-bike rack. So the maximum that you'll see on a bike is a 3-bike, it's called a trilogy rack. The racks are designed so that even if there are bikes loaded in one of the positions, you can still load the other positions from the curb. You don't have to stand in the street. The way you would do that is you put one of the wheels up in the cradle, change your grip, and then walk the other wheel into the cradle by pushing the bike into the cradle. The ferry takes bikes on board, and there are e-lockers at the terminal. And that's transit. So let's continue with the end of the presentation. How do you, now that you know about all these options, what are some tips for establishing the habit? The first thing I would say, based on having been a bike coordinator myself, I started my second career in transportation as Stanford's first bicycle program coordinator way back in the mid-90s. And what I found and advised my commuters was, don't think of bicycling as one big habit that somebody waves a wand and all of a sudden you're an experienced bicyclist, you don't have any questions. It's really a lot of little habits. Be patient with yourself and establish those little habits, get them working one or two at a time. That's why I kind of started the bicycle driving section with the incremental skills to learn and get proficient with, because those will form a real foundation of confidence for the street riding part of your skill set. When I teach this class at Stanford with a woman named Jane Roston, who used to be their environmental behavioral change trainer, she used to talk about what we call SMART goals. And without going into this, a SMART goal is more likely to be achieved because it's specific, it's measurable, how many times a month, how far, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's not in the indefinite future. It's, I'm going to do that this week on Thursday. Kaizen is another goal-setting framework. It comes from a Japanese word that really means small steps. The thing about the small steps in your brain's procrastination system is that a small step is less likely to excite the fear of success or the fear of failure, and instead keep the brain curious and fascinated. So by breaking this set of things that you want to learn into small steps, you can keep yourself fascinated and proceeding. So what are the steps? Get a working bike. If you don't already have a bike that you want to use, that's probably your first step. We used to joke in the bike commuting world that before bike to work day comes get your bike to work day. Refresh your skills. We've already covered those. And plug into free education, which is what I want to present next. There's lots of options in the Bay Area. We are one of the most, I would say, training-rich environments of any of the major metros. If you're actually going to use the bike for school or work commute, don't try it on a commute day. That's actually trying to put so many things together and succeed. I try it first on a weekend. That way you can take your time on the route, think about how to get through conflict areas and intersections, have your cargo all worked out, and then have a plan B. Transit, as we've said, is a way of getting your bike home if it's disabled, for example, or if the weather turns nasty. But 511 Contra Costa also has a program called Guaranteed Ride Home. In other agencies, this is called Emergency Ride Home. Guaranteed Ride Home gives you a voucher, a set of vouchers, maybe up to several per year, that you can use to, for example, get yourself a transit ride home if you don't have a transit pass. Or if you have a family emergency, get you a ride share, a Lyft or Uber ride home. And then think about how to dress. In the Bay Area, weather is always not too extreme, so you can do a lot of your commutes in street clothes. I find that slowing down for the last half mile means that you are less likely to ride sweaty. Just like any other outdoor activity in the Bay Area, layers are great. I have two different weights of vests, zip-up vests that really I use a lot on the bike. And I have a watch cap, kind of like a seaman's cap, that keeps the wind out of my ears, which tend to catch wind otherwise. In addition to all the streets that are available to you, there's lots of fun places to kind of warm up and get a little bit more used to biking for longer distances. So really quickly, here are some of the many trails available in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. Along the Bay Shore, well, let's start by asking who's used these. I'm going to present them first, Clark, before we put up the poll slide. So the Bay Bridge itself is half equipped with a path from Oakland, from the Oakland port area to Yerba Buena Island. There's a wonderful path called the East Span Path. Along the Bayshore itself, from Powell Street all the way into Richmond, is the East Shore Path. And then along the elevated BART line from Berkeley on up to El Cerrito with the Richmond Greenway extension into Richmond is the Ohlone Greenway. Let's advance this slide here. In the East County area, Concord, the Contra Costa Canal Trail kind of wraps around through Concord and up into Pleasant Hill. So picture of someone approaching an intersection on that trail. Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda, the LMO or La Morinda Trail, very nice. A lot of kids use it to get back and forth to school. And then further east from Concord through Walnut Creek and down the I-680 corridor to Pleasanton is the Iron Horse Trail. Iron Horse because it's a former railroad right-of-way. This is a wonderful half-day ride or quarter-day ride. You can do a BART to BART ride here. Jump on at one of the BART stations on the north end and ride all the way to Dublin BART at the south end, then get on BART and ride BART around the long way through Hayward and up to Oakland and get back to your starting BART station. Further east in North County, Pittsburgh to Antioch, the Delta de Anza Trail. Open, flatlands, not a lot of trees, but a good long ride. And then far east county, Brentwood, Oakley, Knightson, the Marsh Creek Trail. Practice your intersection skills when you cross the intersections. So let's see who has some experience riding these. Great, and let's see the results.
Still have a couple more coming in.
Okay. There's lots of trail miles to go explore, and they can be used as, in some cases, commute segments too, depending on where your destination is. Great. So a lot of experience with the trails in Mid-County. Great. I'm going to scroll down so I can see the bottom results. Excellent. Good. Let's close with some educational resources. As I mentioned, there are several organizations that offer free classes, both online and in person. Bike East Bay covers Alameda and Contra Costa counties, has a full program, probably one of the biggest education programs in the West. San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, even though it's across the bay, it's an easy BART ride away to a lot of their classes, okay, similar sorts of classes. The League of American Bicyclists is the organization that certified me as an instructor starting way back in 1997, and it has some self-teaching materials, short instructional videos about 3 minutes long on a single topic. It's also a place where you can search for instructors and classes and clubs. And then 511 Contra Costa itself is a resource for you. So Bike East Bay, this is what their webpage looks like. And down in the middle, it's take a free class. More about their classes. So they've got bicycle driving classes called Urban Cycling 101. They have a webinar on prevention. They have Adult Learn to Ride. This is my specialty in San Francisco. I'm currently the lead instructor for the group classes that teach you how to ride if you've never been on two wheels before. Bike East Bay also has family cycling workshops that are great. They combine activities for kids and activities for parents, and typically a short ride around the neighborhood. Good way to get the whole family up to speed. San Francisco also has its own series of classes, including a 3-part series called Smart City Cycling. It starts with a webinar, moves to an off-street maneuvering class to get your skills rock solid, and then a simple road practice ride in the inner Sunset, typical shopping streets in San Francisco. So now you've got the basics to get around town. And here are the list of the leagues bike videos. So bikeleague.org is the website. Ride Smart is the video set. So all these elemental skills. So if you're curious what it looks like to do all this scanning, signaling, lane changing, here's your videos. So let's ask what education resources you've already used or would like to use. In the chat, the question is, will the slides be made available to all participants? The answer is yes. And I and the instructors in San Francisco and Bike East Bay hope to see you in one of the classes. Great. So we didn't ask how many of these represent things you've already done or things that you would like to do, but good, a lot of interest here. To wrap up, here's a slide with the topics we covered. And this whole slide set will be available on 511 Contra Costa's website. So I'd like to open it up to questions. And while I do that, I'm going to review some of the things that are already up in the chat. Amber, I'm going to take the last question that I see. Where is the best place to learn more about biking laws in the Bay Area, especially Walnut Creek? I'm curious about sidewalk riding rules. I would start with bikeeastbay.org's website and see if they have a bike laws page. If you wanted to go city by city, you would look in the city's list of ordinances. Sometimes it's useful just to search on sidewalk riding Walnut Creek. I think that's where I actually found the Walnut Creek excerpt. The vehicle code, if it's a state law, then you would look at the state vehicle code. There's a legislative info search. That's leginfo.ca. So when I want to find out about a state law, that's where I go. Bruce Olson suggests adding Big Break Trail to list of trails and offers some more specifics on some other trails. Bruce is an instructor. Bruce has taught for many years through Bike East Bay. And 511 Contra Costa notes that there's much more information available on the Guaranteed Ride Home program at their GRH webpage. And Bruce Olson also observes that the bus bike racks are designed for some pretty standard old bike designs and may not all fit perfectly. It's a good idea if you have any questions about whether your bike's going to fit well on a bus rack to go to a place where buses lay over, maybe at a transit station where the drivers take breaks, and ask whether you can try the bus rack. Okay. Bruce talks about mirrors, about is it worth a risk of putting a mirror on your helmet or your eyeglasses because it could damage your eye during a crash? Everyone needs to make their own risk assessment. I feel that it keeps me so much safer that I'm willing to have it on my head. So I prefer the head-mounted mirror. Securing an e-bike, take the battery with you. I will do that actually. One thing I always do is I remove the dashboard, which is removable. But if I'm going to be away for a long time, I'll remove the battery from the bike as well, stick it in my bike bag and sling it over my shoulder. I can also, if I bring my charger along, the charger is kind of like a laptop charger, only a little bit bigger. I can go into, say, a lunch meeting and have my bike battery being charged and adding a few more miles to my return range while I'm indoors, and meanwhile I'm securing the battery. The battery's locked to the bike. You typically have a special key that you carry with you that allows you to unlock the battery. It comes right on, comes right off. Quart, if we have any more questions, please let me know.
There's one question. What is the speed limit on trails?
Varies by agency. I should mention that the class 3, the very fastest assist e-bikes, are subject to slightly different rules. They can be prohibited from trails. there's kind of a grandfathering there because it used to be that there was no way to distinguish a class 3 bike from a class 1, class 2 bike. I think labeling has changed now so that is possible. I hope my class 3 bike isn't restricted from all the trails because I just like to slow down and use the trail as part of my route. So it does affect me. Speed limit, speed limits are rarely enforced on trails, but just like on the street, what is called the basic speed law applies, which is basically if you're riding faster than is safe for conditions, you can be cited. I see a question from Dara about whether these classes, for example, Bike East Bay's and San Francisco Bike Coalition classes are free or need to pay. The answer is they are free. They are grant funded. The lessons that I teach through my coaching service, that's private lessons. That's a fee-based system. With that, I'm around for as long as anyone still has questions. This is my contact information at the bottom, and at the top is the name of the agency that has been so gracious to present this, 511 Contra Costa, and the name of today's class, Bike Commuting Basics, Street Riding Safety.
John, there's one question in from Bruce. He asked, how can I take a bicycle and a bicycle trailer on public transit, specifically BART, that would be with a 150-pound load on the trailer?
The answer on many systems is that the trailer is prohibited. However, a trailer, depending on its configuration, may act a lot like a hand cart. So it's debatable whether you could decouple the bike from the trailer before you board the vehicle, quickly get the bike on board, and then quickly get the trailer on board. I've done stuff like that, not on BART. It's a matter of not holding up the train and taking the risk that the car is so full that that whole transfer operation is going to be difficult. I don't have a set answer for that. I would start by reading the rules of the transit system. I want to make the offer that if anyone thinks of a question after we close the webinar, I'm available at the email address below, and that's also my mobile number there. I'm seeing some comments at the Bay Bridge return trip. Well, that would be the downhill direction. Yes, the uphill direction on the Bay Bridge path is quite achievable. It's no more than a 3% grade. For the steepest grade you'll typically see on a long approach to a bike bridge over, say, a freeway is 5%. So the Bay Bridge path at 3% is totally doable. Anybody can do it with their kids as well. So don't worry about the fact that it's on a bridge. It's a spectacular view, and hopefully someday we'll have it connected to San Francisco at great expense.
However, I have done it with a lot of headwinds before, and that has made it a lot more difficult.
Okay, Cora, I'll hand it over to you to close.
Great, thank you, everyone. Thank you, John, for this great presentation. Really appreciate it, and thank you, everyone, for your participation. We had great participation in the polls, and it seemed like people were really engaged, and appreciate everyone's questions and all that. And we're also available here for any other further questions that you might have.
Right, and avail yourselves of the other programs of 511 Contra Costa, especially if you're going to build a commute guaranteed ride home, the Secure Your Bicycle program, and all the other supporting programs for the other transit modes. Thanks, everybody.